Welcome to Economics Rabbit. Today we're going to be looking at the non-price factors that cause the demand curve to change. These can cause an increase in demand or a decrease in demand, depending on the factor. So what are these non-price factors? Because remember, price factors, they cause a movement along the demand curve, whereas non-price factors cause the curve itself to change. These factors include the following: the price of substitute goods, the price of complementary goods, income changes, advertising, interest rate changes, population changes, fashion and trends, and population changes. Okay, so let's begin by drawing the diagram. Here we're looking at a diagram. We're showing that demand is increasing from D to D1, and as a consequence there's an increase in the demand. Now, at the original price of P and quantity Q, we now have a big increase in demand. The quantity demand that has now increased to Q2. So we have an increase in demand, but price has remained the same. Now, this is because we're holding what we call ceteris paribus assumptions. So for example, we're saying that as the price is the same, it's held constant, and if there's a change in one of these non-price factors that we just talked about, then it will cause the demand curve to shift to the right. Okay, now equally so, the demand curve can shift to the left, and this is called a fall in demand. If the demand curve shifts to the left, this is a decrease in demand brought about by, again, one of the non-price factors. So the demand moves from D to D2, and as a result, the quantity falls from Q to Q2. So we have a lower quantity demand now in our diagram here. Okay, so that illustrates a fall in demand and an increase in demand brought about by non-price factors. Okay, so what are these non-price factors? Well, the first one is the price of substitutes. Okay, substitutes are goods that can be used instead of each other. So for example, tea and coffee are substitutes, maybe not perfect substitutes, but they're substitutes. Butter and margarine. In this example here, we have Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Now, for example, here we have the price of Coke increasing. So when the price of Coke goes from P1 to P2, there's a movement along the demand curve for Coke, and there is an increase in the demand for Pepsi. So the demand for Pepsi is actually increasing. There is no change in the price of Pepsi, but the demand for Pepsi at each price level is going up. The next one is the price of complements. Complements are goods that can be used with each other. So for example, tennis rackets and tennis balls, tennis rackets and tennis courts. If the price of tennis courts goes up, well, there may be less demand for tennis rackets because people are going to find it more expensive to play tennis, so they're going to buy less tennis rackets. Cars. The complementary goods for cars would be petroleum or electricity if you have an electric car. So the cost of electricity will also determine, or the cost of petrol will determine the demand, what the demand is like for cars. So when the price of petrol rises, demand for cars goes down. Another example would be a torch and batteries. Okay, these are all complementary goods. There are loads of other examples as well that I'm sure you can think of yourselves. Income changes. Income changes too are very important. They cause the demand curve to change. Now we have two types of goods though. We have what we call normal goods. Normal goods are goods when our income rises, the demand for them rises, and when our income falls, our demand for these goods falls as well. So a good example would be a car. A car, we get a higher paying job, we buy a bigger car. We get a higher paying job, instead of renting a house, we end up buying a house. Normal good. Okay, usually good quality goods are considered normal goods. And inferior goods then are goods that have usually a lower quality, they're cheaper goods. So for example, I used to have a very cheap bicycle in college. I no longer have a cheap bicycle. I've got a car, right? So once I graduated, I have a car. And a cheap second-hand bicycle would be a good example of an inferior good. I know there are bicycles that are higher quality, but a cheap bicycle is an inferior good. Pizza, if people's incomes goes down, demand for restaurants, which is a normal good, will go down, but demand for things like pizzas will increase because pizzas are much cheaper than going out to a fancy restaurant. So these are inferior goods and normal goods. So again, if your income goes up, demand for normal goods goes up, and demand for inferior good goes down. And if your income goes down, demand for normal good goes down, and demand for inferior goods goes up. The next one we're going to look at is advertising. Advertising simply increases the demand for everything. That's why people advertise, obviously. The more ads there are, the more demand there are for certain things. Ceteris paribus. Now, the next one is a bit more tricky. Interest rates. Interest rates are the cost of borrowing money. So when the cost of borrowing money increases, well, they borrow less money. And sometimes people use borrowed money to buy things. So maybe if you want to buy a house, for example, you're going to borrow money. You're going to get a big loan, or sometimes people get auto loans. You get an auto loan to buy a car. If the interest rate you pay on that loan goes up, well, it's going to cost you more to get the loan, and your demand for cars is going to go down. And also, if interest rates increase, it means you're paying more money to the bank. You've less money to buy other goods and consume other goods in the economy as well. Okay, so that's interest rates. And of course, also interest rates are the reward you get for saving. So if you save money in the bank, you get interest rates in return. So if the interest rate goes up, you're going to get more money back in interest rates, and hence you're going to want to save more money. The next one is population changes. Again, this is rather simple. You have more people, more demand for most goods if you have a big increase in population. Now, if population is falling, there might be a fall in demand for certain types of goods. Or if the demographics of the population is changing, that could also affect, if there's more old people, it could affect the types of goods that you actually have in your economy and the types of goods demanded. Fashion and trends. Well, if something becomes fashionable, demand for that good is going to increase. You're going to have more demand for goods that are trendy and in fashion. Of course, they can go out of fashion as well, and then demand will fall again. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening. This is Economics Rabbit, and I hope you enjoy the lesson and have a nice day. Thank you.